Welcome everyone to our Facebook Live today. My name is Nancy Bronstein. I'm coming to you from my sewing studio in Western Massachusetts, and welcome all of our Facebook and YouTube viewers. Today I'm going to share with you a project that I made from some old blue jeans that I hope you're going to enjoy. Also, in the process of making this project, we're going to go over various skills that you might want to acquire and maybe clear up some confusion about various things that you can do with the Icon 2, as well as our other embroidery machines. So today I have Ryan and Amy helping me in the background, and they will feed me any questions that you ask. And please do ask questions, because otherwise I feel like I'm just sitting here and talking to myself. So without further ado, the project that this class is based on is this table topper that I made, like I said, let's see if I can get the angle right, out of old blue jeans. I've been collecting blue jeans for quite some time. I have 4 grown children, and someday I want to make a denim quilt. Haven't gotten to it yet, but I have a large stack of parts of old blue jeans and am still collecting. So today we're going to make something like this. Now, the basis of this project is a design that is in the Icon 2. It is called Patchwork in the Hoop, the type of design it is. And basically, it is one of these corners. It took four of the blocks to make this table runner. And so it's this design here that I took the design and then brought it into the software, made it bigger, and also added the quilting lines so that I could put the quilt sandwich right in the hoop and create the piecing at the top. It's basically a stitch and flip method, if you're familiar with that. I'm going to demo it. And so as I'm doing that, I'm also beginning to quilt the quilt sandwich together in the hoop. And then with the straight stitches that I added in the software, that finishes out the quilting. Then I put it together with quilt as you go technique, and then added this felted star in the middle. Now that star is from the mySewnet embroidery library. And in order to make that, you would need our felting kit. However, you could put an applique there, or you don't have to put anything at all. It just, I felt like having that focal point added something, and so I added the felted star. So I'm going to show you where you would find these designs in the Icon 2. And I'm going to switch my camera over to my Icon 2. And there are also of these stitch and flip type patchwork in the hoop designs in our mySewnet embroidery library. So there's more variety. There's some really cute ones in there. And if you have the subscription to our library, then you can download those at any time, or they are available for purchase individually. So I'm going to switch my camera to my Icon 2. And then, of course, this is the screen that you'll see when you first open up the Icon 2. And I go into embroidery. And I happen to know where the designs reside in the menu. But if I didn't, as with any specialized embroidery technique, I could find the available designs for that technique by going into the Help Center, going to Techniques and Tutorials, Embroidery, and I would pick the type of embroidery that I wanted to do. What I want to do today is, actually it's in quilting techniques. I want to do piecing, and I'm going to do patchwork in the hoop. And we have this full instruction manual for doing this technique. And as you can see, as I click through it, it tells you exactly how to do it. But the really clever thing, I think, is that with all of our embroidery and sewing technique tutorials for different techniques, they have the instructions, but there's also a choice of content. And when you touch content, it will open up and show you the embroidery designs or the sewing stitches that are recommended for that particular technique. And then you can touch it and load it. So I could just touch this and it'll load in the background. And then I'm going to close this tutorial. Now I'm going to just put it in the center. And I have my block ready to be stitched out. If I already knew where this block resided, which with quilting techniques, it's not such a mystery because it's probably going to be in the category quilts. Some of the other techniques, when you go into, say, your embroidery techniques and say felting, like the felted star that I made, the felting designs are in a variety of different areas when you're looking at all of our embroidery designs. They're not just in one category. So a lot of these are spread out. Like there's applique designs in probably every category when we get into the embroidery design menu. They're not all by themselves. They're by what the design is depicting. Like if it's a holiday design or if it's a flower or it's a children's design. So they could be all over the place. So if I don't know where things are, I'll open up the techniques and tutorials and then open up the tutorial itself and touch the content. And then that will show me the designs that are available for that particular technique. But since this is a quilting technique, I bet that it's in quilting. So I'm going to open up all of my embroidery designs and I'll go to quilt, and there it is. So I'm going to load there. And the other thing I wanted to mention before I forget is that, oh, and I just deleted it. Wanted to put it in the center. What I wanted to mention is that, let me get my sheet here. In the instructions in the tutorial, it mentions that there are templates available and that you can cut out the individual pieces before you start to do this embroidery. Since this is old blue jeans and I have more fabric than I have time, I am not going to cut them out, and I'll show you the way that I do it. I'm just sort of fast and furious. But if you're doing this particular block with really precious fabric, you're going to want to get these templates and cut out your fabric so you don't waste any. And this is available in the book that came with your Icon 2 with all the embroidery designs. It's way towards the back where the patchwork designs are. So just look for this and then you'll have templates for your project. Of course, this is for the original size, not the size of block that I'm going to expand it to make a bigger placemat, or not placemat, but table topper. Now, I could have kept the original size of the block and just made more, but I kind of wanted to make it bigger. That's just the vision that I had. And this is going to be a way for you to learn how to do that. If you have you want to do something like this, but not exactly this particular project, it's a skill that's good to have. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my screen on my Icon. So this is our embroidery design here on the screen. And I am going to, actually, let me go back. I'm going to use my metal hoop because while you could do this technique piecing the top first, then quilting it, or then making a quilt sandwich and quilting the 3 layers together, I wanted this to be a fast project. And so I'm going to start by having my backing fabric and my batting in place, and I'm going to start to do the stitch and flip on the batting, so that then it's just much faster than, you know, trying to do the top, all the top, and then quilt it. This is just a different technique. And once I get enough of these squares, then I can do a quilt as you go method to put the squares together, and then use one of our quilt binders to bind the edges, which we have two different quilt binders. We have one, the original one that came out is certainly good for this type of application for a table runner or a table topper, in that it makes a binding that's one fabric thick on the edge. Whereas our 5/8 inch binding does the traditional double binding. So either one for table topper I think is fine. For a bed quilt, you might want to stick with the 5/8 inch so you have a double thickness on the edges. So by doing the project like this and usually utilizing the quilt binder, you could really bang out a bunch of these for the holidays. So without further ado here, I'm going to show you how to do the stitch and flip. So first of all, I'm going to make sure that I have the right hoop chosen here. And I was going to tell you why I'm doing the metal hoop. So I'm doing the metal hoop because it makes it really easy to have a lot of thickness. I love the way the metal hoops work, in case you don't have one, is it's this flat piece of metal, like a metal frame. And there are these really strong magnets that hold everything in place. So I really like using metal hoops for quilting in the hoop, because you could have a really thick quilt sandwich here, and these magnets will hold it down really well. I mean, you could float it on a piece of stabilizer, but it won't be as secure, I think, until you get it tacked down with the basting stitches. I really like the metal hoops for quilting in the hoop. And this is a 200 by 200, and it's just the right size for me, I think. And I also love the metal hoop for whenever I embroider on something that's really delicate, like tulle or organza, because since it's not being smashed in the hoop when you hoop it together, it's not going to stretch any fibers, yet it's secure. Or I like it for the other end of the spectrum, when you're going to maybe embroider on leather or vinyl, and then you can hold it securely, but you don't have to hoop the material in the hoop and make marks on the vinyl or perhaps stretch out your hoop. So I use the metal hoops a lot. If you don't have one, you really should try it. So I've got the 240 by 150, and I'm going to demo this technique to do this block. So again, I have the right hoop chosen down here. So then I'm going to touch stitch out. And I'm going to leave I'm not going to leave all of the default settings. I'm going to go back and explain why I'm going to change them. So when I quilt in the hoop, I change some of the settings, because when you're doing embroidery, the way that the tension is set, the tension is kind of loose on the bottom, and so that the stitch is really flat, so it doesn't build up a lot of bulk there. And it doesn't look like a straight stitch would look on the back of a quilt. It doesn't have the same tension on it. So what I do to make the back look like the front, since you are going to see the stitching on the back, is I do two things. I begin by bringing my bobbin thread up, and I also will turn off the deluxe stitch system, which then will change the settings on the interface on the icon to tension rather than thread portioning, and I jack up the tension to about 4.6, 4.4, depends on the thickness of the quilt sandwich. And that way the back of the quilt looks like a quilt instead of an embroidery stitch out. An embroidery stitch out of a straight stitch, which it just doesn't look the same as when you stitch on your domestic machine. So I'm going to do that. And so I'm going to go back to my screen here. I'm going to touch stitch out, and I'm going to turn off my active stitch technology right here. And I did call it deluxe stitch system. That's not what I meant. I meant the active stitch technology. And then I'm going to click on OK. And where you check your tension Oh, I've got my 200 by 200 hoop, and I need my 240 by 150 here. So I'm going to put the right hoop in so it will accept it. And I'm going to go to my stitch out progress. And this is where you'll see your tension. So before I turned off the active stitch technology, this would have said thread portioning. And when I turned it off, it turned it to tension. You can see the tension is pretty low. So I'm going to jack that up to about 4.6. What I would do is, if this were a project that I had just started to work on, this particular type of quilt sandwich, I would definitely take a few stitches, see what it looks like, and maybe bring it up, you know, a tick or two, or go down a tick or two to get just the effect that I want. So I'm going to bring up my bobbin thread and change my view here. Here we go. And I've got my, nope, that's not the view I want. There's the view I want. So I've got my bobbin thread up here. And in the process, I unthreaded my needle. So we will rethread the needle with our amazing needle threader. Get rid of that. And the first thing this is going to do is it's going to stitch out basically the block design. Okay, so I have a few questions, or one question before I get started here. And that is, what type of batting do you use? I use all sorts of different types. If I wanted to be more fluffy, I would use 80-20. For something like this, I'd use whatever spare batting I had laying around, actually, because it's not a priceless quilt. It's a table topper, and with denim, you know, I wouldn't go all out on the type of batting that I would use. But, you know, their batting is kind of like stabilizer. You have different purposes for different types. Wool, you can fold, and it doesn't, the fold doesn't become permanent like it does with some of the other battings, and it is warm, it is washable. So there's different, this isn't a batting class, but there are different types of reasons to use different types. And for this, I think it's just a piece of 80-20, and it'll be just fine. Okay, now back to our needle here. So the first thing it's going to do, and I'm using red thread so that you can actually see the stitching, is it's going to stitch out the shape. And since it's a straight stitch, it shouldn't take too long. And it'll just stitch the batting to the backing. And then as we add the individual pieces, it will really make the quilt sandwich become one again, you know, become a quilt. Now, the thing about the metal hoops is if you bring your scissors too close to the magnets, they really want to get stuck. So I'm going to wait to cut that. So part of the design is it will actually put numbers. It'll number each individual part so you know which part to do first. So I'm sure you can't see on the screen, but it has embroidered a 1 here, a 2 there, a 3 there, and a 4 there. And that's because you do this piece first, then this piece, then this piece, then this piece. And when you lay these out, the very first piece goes right side up, and all the subsequent pieces become, they're put down right side down against the previous block, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to just take this piece of denim, and you can see I did not cut it out. I'm going to, actually I have to have this right side up, like I just said. It's going to stitch it down, and I just have to pay attention to leaving enough around that square so that I can depending upon how I'm going to do the quilt as you go and attach them if I want to have extra there. So then I'm just going to push the start button and it's going to stitch it down. And again, I have red thread here so that you can see what's happening. Let's see if I can get in a little bit closer. That should be better. So if I'd had the templates, I would have cut out a piece approximately that shape. And since I don't have the templates, what I'm going to do is before I put the next piece on, actually I'll put the next piece on and then I'm going to cut both pieces close over here. So for the next piece, let's see which piece of denim would look good. So I'm going to put right sides together. And I happen to know this is going to be my seam line here. And that next piece is going to go over to here. So I know it has to at least extend beyond this number 3 here. So I put right sides together and I'm going to leave a little extra over here, and I have way more than I need. So I know I'm going to cover up that next block area there. I meant to hit the scissors there and I hit the start button. So now I am going to trim, and I'm going to, what's going to happen next is this is going to come over this way. Oops, you can't see in the mirror, in the camera. This is going to come here and this is going to form the block that's next to that one. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of all this extra dark blue and also just have a 1/4 inch seam here. So I'm going to trim along here. And I know that this block is only going to go this far. So all this out here could be trimmed off as well. So I'll bring it over to another area so maybe you can see what I'm cutting better. Yes, this is better. Okay. So I'm gonna cut along here so that I have just a 1/4 inch seam allowance. These probably aren't the best scissors for this technique, but at least they're fairly sharp. And now I know that this is another block here, so I don't need all this stuff hanging out here. I'm not going to be super accurate, but I'm going to leave myself definitely enough for the next technique. So then I bring this over here, and the very next step, what it's going to do is it's going to do a triple stitch along here, and that's going to make this lay flat. But it is a good idea to do some finger pressing. I actually, if you pull this really tight and you finger press really well, that triple stitch will be mainly in your ditch there. I'm using red thread, so I'm going to not pull it real tight because I kind of like the look of the triple stitch along the edge there. And you'll see what I mean when I do this next step. So I'm not going to smush that down real tight. I'm kind of leaving it loose. Oh, got to change my camera. Okay, so the next part is going to be this last corner here. So what I'm going to do is I need to, the next piece of fabric is going to have to lay right side to right side here. So let's see, this looks good. Just grabbing pieces at random of denim. And I know that my stitch line is If you wonder where your stitch line is, I mean, it's in this area, but you could always hit the start button and you'll see where that stitch line is going to be, because it's going to be right along there. So I know it's going to be there. I'm going to put my denim down. And I can see that it's right on an angle there, and then stitch this piece down. And I could have pulled it down further. If I wasn't talking, I would have conserved the fabric a little bit better. Then I'm going to take this out and cut off this extra stuff here, because you see the next part, it's going to look like this. So I'm going to switch over to it's actually my ironing board, so you can see what I'm cutting. So I have my seam here. I'm going to, this is all extra because this is actually from my second piece. So I'm going to cut along here. I bet some of you are thinking, oh, it'd be so much simpler if she just cut out the templates. You know, everybody has different ways of doing things. I just feel like I didn't want to spend time cutting templates out. Okay, so now we can flip this over, and it's going to do the triple stitch to stitch that part down and add a little decorative element. Now the very next part is this big triangle down here. So I can cut all the way across here right now to have better visibility, which is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to just put the right sides together here and stitch it, and it'll flip over. Okay, so I have a question of what needle do I prefer for this technique? I'm just using a universal 90 needle or an embroidery 90 needle. I could, if I were sewing, I probably would use a jeans needle or a top stitch needle, depending upon what I was doing with the jeans. Because when you're sewing, there's a little bit more, you know, tension on it, where you're kind of encouraging the fabric to go here and there, and having a sharper needle, you know, and a more robust needle, having a jeans needle is probably better for sewing. But with embroidery with this, I don't find that I really need a jeans needle, although I really do like the Microtex needles also as well. So I'm going to go back to cut this. And I'm just going to, I know that my next triangle is going to be like this. So I'm just going to cut across here and cut 2 layers at once here. Save time, or maybe I won't. Yeah, save time. I hope you all realize that when educators are talking and demoing something, they are not quite as careful as they would be with real life projects. We're just trying to get this done quickly and demonstrate around 4 cameras and not bore you. We want to get it done quickly, but clearly. So I would spend a little bit more time cutting that. That seems a little too big. Let's go back and cut a little bit more. Actually, it doesn't matter. But if this were an actual project, I would cut this 1/4 inch seam there. But since this is just a demo, we will leave it like that, call it done. So going back to my needle, we have this last part to do. Oh, this piece is way too big. Okay. And another thing I would have done if this was a real project is I would have ironed everything before we got started. But I have a big pile. The top of the pile was ironed. I guess the bottom of the pile was not. So I'm going to pull this over here. And just like with paper piecing, you just have to make sure that when you flip it over that you actually have enough that'll go down and fill this corner. You don't want to try to conserve fabric and then shoot yourself in the foot in the process. Now at this point, I would take this over to the cutting area and cut this to a 1/4-inch seam, but we're going to pretend that we did because that's not all that terribly interesting for you to see. And we're going to bring this back down and do the last part of the piecing here. Now the very last color band in this embroidery is going to do a square around your block. And that can be your stitch line for where you're going to join the individual blocks together. Now I'm actually embroidering through about 3 layers of denim there, plus the batting and the backing. So now at this point, you could take this off of your hoop and trim it and do a quilt as you go technique. Or since you still have it in the hoop, you can add some more embellishments to it. On my project, I took the block and added more quilting lines on it, some like as you saw in the beginning of today's class. Or you could add some little embroideries, like in one of the things that's nice that I have it right here right now is I can use the hoop scanning function in the Icon 2 to take a picture of my block, and then I can see on the screen exactly what an embellishment will look like on this block. But before I do that, I want to show you a finished block without any embellishment. That's a little neater than the one I have here. So this is what the block looks like when you're all done, if you haven't added any quilting or any embroideries. And then you can sew it together with a quilt as you go. I would have left more of a seam allowance here, but I'm actually going to make this into a mug rug and put, just bind it, and I'm done with that one. But going back to our needle area here, what I'm going to show you is there are 2 great features with the Icon 2 for design placement. And one of the ones that I want to show you quickly is hoop scanning, because I can take a picture of this and I can see right on the display what the embroidery will look like, and then click on go and get it embroidered and get it done. So for hoop scanning, you do want to take off your foot because it's going to take a picture, and get rid of the thread, because otherwise it'll take a picture of the thread. So I'm going to go back to my screen here, In order to do hoop scanning, I need to go back to embroidery edit. Then go to hoop options, start hoop scan, touch OK. And it's going to take a picture of all the areas of the hoop that are embroiderable. Now, if you don't have the icon 2, if you have one of our other FOFFs, you could certainly use precise positioning to position an embroidery on this block. The hoop scanning gives you the ability to preview what it's going to look like on the block. And I'll show you what I mean. So when it's all done, I close hoop options, and I have a picture of the fabric right and the stitching right on my screen. Now, if this were print fabric, you know, some sort of floral or other type of print, it would be even more helpful to have the hoop scanning, because you could see how to position the individual embroidery given the design and the fabric. But I just like doing this anyway, so I can see what it's going to look like in this configuration. So then I could just go in and partial the flowers, go in and grab a flower, not an insect. And let's see, which one did I choose before? No, I could just choose this one. And then I can see exactly where I want to put it, if I want to make it smaller, if I want to make it bigger. And then if I decide that I like it, then I can just select go. And if I do that, I have to remember to start. I'll show you what I mean. If I press go, it's going to want to do the whole embroidery again. So we're going to turn active stitch technology back on because we want it for the embroidery. Select go, OK. And then when we look at the color bands here, all of this is what we already did. We'll have to go down to here where the flower starts, and all of the subsequent stitches will be the flower stitches, and we can stitch out our flower on the block that we just made. And you'll end up with something like this. This is actually a bigger block after I resized it, but I decided to put the embroidery in that spot. So you could get something like that. Now think about what this would look like if you had 4 of those, all with the flower. It would look really nice. So now I'm going to show you how to resize and send the design off to your software. So I'm going to go back to embroidery edit. And the picture is kind of distracting, so I'm going to go into hoop options, and I can change the background.
Nancy, change your camera.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So I'll start that again. I want to get, let's show you what it looks like. So when I went back to embroidery edit, now I see what it looked like before I showed you how to stitch out the flower. And I want to get rid of the picture now because it's distracting. So I touched hoop options. And for background, I no longer want the scan hoop background from when I just scanned it. What I want to do is have no background. So then I touch hoop options to close it, and I'm back to my design. I'm going to get rid of the flower. And now I'm going to want to make this bigger, but this is the edge of the hoop that I just used. So I'm going to have to use a larger hoop if I want to make this bigger. So I'm going to go into hoop options, before I used the 240 by 150, and it was the 150 that the width that was really tight. So I'm going to go to 200 by 200 because I want to stick with my metal hoops that I own. Certainly, you know, if you had a, you know, if you wanted to use a bigger hoop and not use a metal hoop, then there's all sorts of other possibilities. So I'm going to close this window by touching hoop options, and my design is selected. To resize it, I'm going to touch edit design. And if I want to resize down here, I'm going to touch resize. If I want to scale, I would touch over here. And if you ever are confused and you want to know, you know, well, is that resize or is that scale? You can touch the question mark and then touch any of these icons, and it will tell you what that icon does. And this will tell you that it's scale. And there's an important difference between scale and resize. With resize, it will make the item smaller or bigger, but it also changes the stitch count. So if you want to retain the same sort of look to the embroidery, you're better off with resize, and you can also make a larger percentage change of the size. With scale, it will make it smaller or bigger, but it will not change the stitch count. So if you make it, sometimes when you make things bigger, the stitches might be too far apart, or if you make them smaller, they might be too tight. And that could happen, too tight could happen with resize also. It's always good when you change the design size to stitch out a sample. But I generally, if I can, resize because I feel like it maintains the original look of the design better. So, oh, and also with scale, you shouldn't go above or below a 20% size change. So I'm going to touch resize. Then I have to touch resize again. And this is the resize button over here. I'm going to touch there. And I'm just going to go in and make it 185 because I know the width of my hoop is 200. So I can't go too much bigger than 185. And it's a square, so it's 185, you know, on each side. And then I'm happy with that. I'm going to touch OK. So I could go ahead and stitch that out, which is what I did with the block that had the flower on it that I just showed you. Or I could send this design to the software so that then I can add a different quilting motif, then send it back to the Icon 2 to be stitched out. Now, if you have our mySewnet software, and you have your Icon 2 on your wireless, you have your computer on your wireless, then you can touch your design and you can touch send design, and it will send the design to other wireless capable devices that are within the network. Right now, I have the Win laptop and we have the Creative Icon 2. If I had another Creative Icon 2, that would be listed as well. But I'm going to send it over to my laptop to be worked on in the software. So now I've got to do a few things with this interface here to show you the mySewnet and not my sewing machine. So I need to go in and go to present so that I can present your mySewnet on my laptop. Okay, so now you should be seeing, Amy, are you seeing the mySewnet software on one side and the Icon 2 on the other? No answer. Uh-oh.
You're good.
Okay, I'm good. Whew. I thought there was a lag there, and I thought, oh boy, everybody dropped off, and I really am talking to myself here. Okay, so we have our enlarged block here, and I can take this into the create area and digitize the design that I had on the original project that I showed you with the lines. And what that will I'm going to need this design to be in digitizing so that I can put the lines on the block in relationship to the blocks that are already there. So the first thing I would do is save this design, which I have already done. But in order to save it, I would export it. And then I would save it somewhere where I know that I have it, which I have here in my designs here. So I'm not going to export it again because it's already there. So I have this design saved. Then I go up to create. Actually, I'm going to go back to home. It's one more step. When I take this, when I open up digitizing, it would normally be, I'm going to open, well, let's just take a step back. Sorry to be unclear. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to explain once I open up digitizing why I'm doing that. I've already saved it, so I can bring it back whenever I want, but I'm going to delete it for a specific reason, and I'll explain that when I think it'll be clearer. So now I'm going to go to create. And in create, I'm going to touch digitizing so I can make my own original design, and it's going to open up a new window. And I am going to start a new design with no picture. Because in digitizing, I could import a picture and trace it and use that as a starting off point. And I'm going to leave, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to change my hoop to the 200 by 200 metal. And finish. And now I'm going to insert that copy of the block that I already saved. And the reason why I deleted it on the other screen is that when we close this, if I hadn't deleted it, since I'm inserting the embroidery design in this hoop, we would have 2 copies of that, and we don't want 2 copies. Because this is now a copy of the block, and I'm going to make the design over that, and then I'm going to close the digitizing window and go back to the original window, and we'll own, because I deleted this in the original window, I will not have, it won't stitch out twice. So in order to make the lines that I had made before, what I would do is I go up to point create, and I don't want pattern fill. I want a certain type of line, so I'm going to touch the down arrow here and go to double stitch. I could make it triple stitch. Double stitch is fine for me, the way that I want it to look. Now, it can be a little confusing with some extra lines here. This is kind of your seam allowance here. When I make the design lines, these double lines is actually, these are actually the stitch lines. So the first time I did this, I made my design go up to this line, and then I had a big blank right here. So you see, this is one block between the double lines, and so I want to go from side to side, and also here I want to go from the double line to the double line. If I leave this empty, it's going to look funny. So in order to create a line, I'm going to touch create line, and I'm going to go up. I want to start down here, and everything I do, I basically want a right angle. I'm not going to have any curves. So I'm going to hold down my shift key so that when I stop, it'll make a corner. So I'm going to start right in the seam there and click and make a stitch, and then go up here. And I'm going to overshoot here because this area is going to be in the seam allowance. And then I'm just going to make another one here. And then if I come down here and try to get it at the same spot, it just doesn't work. What I have to do is go off of it. Or there may be a way to make that work that I don't know. But what I do is I make them all in the general vicinity, and when I'm done, I pull them all on top of each other. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So now I'm going to go back up here, and come down, go back up here. You could use your grid lines to be more accurate, but in order to save time, I'm just going to eyeball this. And I should have gone over here. So just in case someone has asked a question, when I'm doing mySewnet, I can't see your questions, and I will answer them as soon as I'm done with this part. So now that I've got my lines basically where I want, I could finesse them a little bit more if I wanted. And now I'm going to line all these up in the center here. So it becomes kind of like a fan. They're all on top of each other. And now they will cooperate. And when I'm happy with it, I'm going to right click, and that makes it a design. Then I'm going to go down to this corner. I'm going to hold down my shift key. And this time I have a seam here, and I'm going to go up this way. And I want to get my line to go right to that seam. And I want where it jumps to the next line to be right in the seam as well. And I'm going to overshoot just like I did before. Oh, I should have gone to the left instead of down, and I can always correct that. Oh, again, I did the same thing. Bring that back over here. As long as you don't right click, you can just keep editing these very easily. Now, another tool that can be very helpful is to go to increase your view, like magnify it so that you can see where everything is better. If you need to be a little bit more accurate, like maybe I should bring this one down a bit and bring this one down a bit. But you don't want to click because that makes a new, you want to click right on the stitch point, because otherwise the point that you made, otherwise it makes a new point and a new ray, which we don't want. So we'll bring this one down here. Or I could delete that later, but we'll just leave it there for now and just get these all lined up where I want them to be. Actually, I think we could use another line in there. Oh, looks like I did something I shouldn't have done. So this has to come back over here. And this comes back. I again made a line when I shouldn't have. And this is going to come over here. And then this is going to go down there. And if I hadn't right-clicked by mistake, I would have then gone down and made all of these go right into the point like I did here. And I'm going to do, I could do the same thing in here and in here. I could go down, I could come from this corner and fan out, or I can come from this corner and fan out, from this corner and fan out, wherever I decide that I like the look of it. And then it's going to end up looking like, let me pull out the one that I made that I actually stitched out. We're going to insert. When it's all said and done, it's going to look like that. And you can see that the original stitches to do the piecing are still on there. And I needed those in order to get these lines in the right place. But when you close your digitizing window, it throws all of this back in the original embroidery window. And that's why I had to get rid of the original block design, or the block would stitch out twice, which we don't want. Now, I would go ahead and save this to my hard drive so that I didn't lose it. And I actually have already saved it. And then to send it back to my icon 2, I go up to File and Send. And if I did not have my icon 2 on, say I was working on this somewhere else, I could send it to my cloud, and then I can access my cloud on my icon 2 when I get home. But if I want to send it right back to my icon 2, and actually before I click send, I'm going to delete the file that was on the screen of the icon 2 so I don't have 2 copies of it. Just bear with me for a minute. Okay, so now I'm going to click send. And before I close down mySewnet, let's see if there were any questions. No, there weren't. Okay, so I'm going to close down mySewnet. And Amy, if you could make yeah, exactly what I needed. So this is what I have now on my icon 2. That's the design that I made on the in the software, using the original design as a jumping off point from first I made it bigger, and then I added the quilting lines in there, so that then you end up with something that looks like this. So you need to make, in order to make this particular table topper, you need to make 4 blocks and then sew them together. And you don't necessarily have to sew them with the big block in the center. You could sew them with these other blocks, and it makes a totally different design. So it's a really quick and easy project, like I said, and you don't necessarily have to make your own embroidery design. You can just pull a design off of your icon 2 and put it on there, or if you don't have the icon 2, there are designs in the mySewnet embroidery library. Some really nice, same concept where it's like stitch and flip to make a block, and then you can put the blocks together to make a quilt or a table runner or a table topper. So we have 3 minutes left. Any questions? So the quilt as you go, I don't have time to cover that, but there are lots of YouTube videos that go over different quilt as you go techniques, and it's an easy, fast way to make a quilt, because you quilted all of it right in the hoop, and then you just have to sew the individual blocks together. So can you show the back? Yes. So this is the back. And you can't really see on the camera, it doesn't really show the quilting, but it's there. You can kind of see like a little line. So again, you don't necessarily have to do it. When you make the stitch and flip, you don't necessarily have to make a quilt sandwich. You could do the whole top, like you're piecing that all together, and then put the layers together and then quilt it another way. But this is so fast, and why not, since you have the ability to. So any other questions? Okay, so thank you for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. And remember that you can always go back. If I talk too fast in one part, you can stop the video and reverse it and see what you missed. So it's thank you again, and happy holidays to everybody coming up. I hope maybe somebody makes this as a holiday gift. Make a nice hostess gift. So long, everybody.